London, 9:45 p.m. A cold autumn wind swept through the streets, making the few pedestrians pull their scarves tighter. The glow of high-end restaurants reflected on the wet pavement, creating an illusion of warmth and luxury. Amidst the expensive cars and elegantly dressed guests, one man stood out. Keanu Reeves, dressed in dark jeans, a simple black sweater, and a worn leather jacket, he looked nothing like the Hollywood superstar whose films had grossed billions. He wasn't here to impress. He was exactly where he wanted to be. Etoile was one of the most exclusive restaurants in London. It was a favorite among business elites, aristocrats, and celebrities. Reservations were mandatory. Keanu didn't have one. As he approached the entrance, a tall doorman in a perfectly tailored suit regarded him with a scrutinizing gaze. "Good evening, sir." The doorman's tone was polite but firm. "Do you have a reservation?" "No. Que nous déplaise comedy. But I was hoping you might have a table for me." The doorman hesitated. People who said things like that usually looked different. Designer suits, luxury watches. This man? He looked like he had just wandered in from the street. "Let me check." He stepped aside, opening the heavy door. As Keanu stepped inside, he immediately felt it, the weight of 100 curious glances. Ashley, the queen of the floor. Behind the reception desk stood Ashley Thatcher, the restaurant's senior hostess. Poised and professional, she had been working at Etoile for 4 years and knew every important guest by face. And the man who had just walked in was not one of them. She noticed everything in an instant. The casual clothes, the slightly disheveled hair, the quiet but confident presence. He didn't look like a millionaire. He didn't look like someone who could afford to be here. As he approached, she raised an eyebrow, giving him the chance to explain himself. "Good evening." She greeted him with a polite but distant smile. "How can I help you?" "Good evening." Keanu nodded. "I'd like to have dinner." Ashley glanced at her computer screen, pretending to check the reservations. "Do you have a booking?" "No." She resisted the urge to roll her eyes. "Of course not. Unfortunately, we are fully booked tonight." Keanu studied her for a moment. "I understand, but I believe you always keep a couple of tables open for special guests." Ashley stiffened slightly. "I'm sorry, sir, but those tables are strictly reserved for our regular patrons." "That's fair." He nodded. "But if one happened to be available..." Now Ashley was certain. This man had no idea what kind of place he had just walked into. People who belonged here didn't ask. They simply expected. "I'm afraid that won't be possible," she said firmly. She wanted him to leave. He didn't. Instead, he took a step closer and in a calm, steady voice said, "Ashley, just find me a table." She froze. How did he know her name? It wasn't on a name tag. He hadn't looked at her screen. He just knew. For the first time that night, Ashley hesitated. Then, exhaling sharply, she made a decision. "All right, sir. One moment." She grabbed a menu and walked him towards the back of the restaurant. She knew exactly where she would seat him. The worst table in Etoile. The table was tucked away near the kitchen, where the waitstaff bustled past, where plates clattered and the scent of food mixed with the heat of the stoves, where nobody wanted to sit. She set the menu down. "Here you go." Keanu glanced at the table, then back at her. She smiled. "This is the best you have?" he asked calmly. "It's a very busy night," she shrugged. He looked at the table again. He didn't seem to care. He sat down, picked up the menu, and said, "All right, I'll order now." Ashley pressed her lips together. He hadn't left. He wasn't embarrassed. She didn't understand what was wrong with him. "Of course," she said, taking out her notepad. "What would you like?" Keanu smiled. "I'll have a tasting menu. And your best glass of wine." Ashley almost laughed. "Oh, this is going to be interesting." The test begins. 15 minutes later, the first course arrived. Delicate slices of salmon, topped with beluga caviar and saffron sauce. A waitress, not Ashley, set the plate down. "Enjoy your meal." Keanu looked up, nodded politely, and picked up his fork. He took a bite, slow, appreciative, as if savoring every flavor. Ashley watched from the other side of the room. She had expected him to look out of place, to glance around nervously, to realize he didn't belong. But none of that happened. He didn't just eat. He enjoyed it, an uninvited witness. At the next table, an elderly man in an elegant suit observed Keanu with quiet curiosity. It was rare to see someone new at Etoile. But what caught his attention wasn't that Keanu was here. It was how he ate, like a man who understood taste, like a man who appreciated the experience. The older gentleman adjusted his glasses and leaned in slightly. "Excuse me," he said warmly. "First time dining here?" Keanu looked up and smiled. "First time? And you went straight for the tasting menu?" "Bold choice. I like trying new things." A good approach. They exchanged a knowing look. And then, Ashley interrupted. She approached the table, ignoring the older man entirely. Do you need anything else? Her voice was cool. Keanu turned to her. No, thank you. Everything's wonderful. Ashley clenched her jaw and walked away. The older man noticed. One mistake, and everything falls apart. Another 30 minutes passed. By the time the final course was served, Ashley was waiting for one moment. The bill. It arrived in a sleek leather folder. 2,000 pounds. Ashley folded her arms. Let's see how he reacts now. Keanu opened the folder, glanced at the total, then casually pulled out his card and placed it on top. Charge it. Ashley's stomach tightened. A declined card? A last-minute excuse? The server took the card and walked to the register. 20 seconds later. Transaction approved. Ashley froze. The card wasn't declined. The bill was paid. And then, the restaurant manager stepped forward. Sir, if I may ask? Keanu looked at him. The manager suddenly recognized him. His face went pale. Ashley saw his lips move, barely above a whisper. Mr. Reeves? Her breath caught in her throat. This wasn't real. It couldn't be real. She looked between the manager and Keanu. He sat there, relaxed, holding the receipt. And then he said, simply, I just came here for dinner. Ashley felt her world collapse. She had made a terrible mistake. She sat down cautiously. Do you even understand what you've done? He began, crossing his arms over his chest. His voice was low and tense. She didn't know what to say. Just saying, I'm sorry wasn't enough. The manager sighed. You humiliated the owner of this establishment. The man who funds this restaurant, who gives you a job. Ashley clenched her hands. I didn't know. And if you had known, would it have changed anything? She froze. He was right. We treat all guests equally here, the manager continued. But you decided you could determine who deserves respect and who doesn't. Ashley felt her cheeks burn. Does this mean I'm fired? The manager didn't answer right away. Instead, he lifted his eyes and looked at Keanu. He had been standing against the wall, silently listening the entire time. Ashley's fate was now in his hands. Keanu's decision. Silence filled the room. Keanu sighed. He sat on the edge of the table, folding his hands. I don't want you to just be fired. Ashley blinked. That wasn't the answer she expected. The manager raised an eyebrow in surprise as well. Keanu continued. Firing you would be easy. You'd leave, find another job, and forget all about this. But would that really teach you anything? Ashley swallowed hard. She didn't know where he was going with this. I want you to go through training, Keanu said. The manager frowned. Training? Yes. I want Ashley to stay. But before she returns to the floor, she needs to take a course on service and customer relations. Ashley stared at him in shock. You're serious? Keanu nodded. Everyone deserves a second chance. But would she take it? Ashley felt a chill run down her spine. He didn't want her to be fired? That didn't make sense. Why are you doing this for me? She asked, struggling to find the right words. Keanu tilted his head slightly. Why did you treat me the way you did? Ashley looked away. She remembered her disdain, her sarcasm, her rudeness. Yet here he was forgiving her. The manager rubbed his temples and exhaled. Keanu, are you sure? We could handle this differently. I'm sure. The actor nodded. Ashley looked at him again. What if I fail? Keanu shrugged. Then that's on you. He paused. I don't expect you to change overnight. But if you don't even try, that's your choice. Ashley stayed silent. Did she really have another option? The first day of training. The next day, they handed her a thick binder full of materials. On the first page, the title read, Customer Orientation and Respect, the Philosophy of Service. She rolled her eyes. What's next? They'll tell me the customer is always right? But as she started reading, her skepticism began to fade. The course wasn't just about politeness. It was about psychology, understanding people, reading their emotions, recognizing subtle cues in their mood. She had never thought about it that way before. And it wasn't just reading. Keanu personally offered to conduct a few training sessions with her. I'm not going to teach you how to carry a tray, he said with a smile. But I'll show you how to communicate differently. Ashley didn't know how to feel about that. The first session with Keanu. He was waiting for her in one of the empty restaurant rooms. They sat at a table. Let's play a game, Keanu suggested. A game? Ashley frowned. Yes, you're the waitress. I'm a difficult customer. Your job is to serve me in a way that makes me leave happy. Ashley sighed. All right. Good evening, sir. Would you like to order something? No, I wouldn't. Keanu frowned. I don't even know why I came here. She blinked. Well, would you like to look at the menu? Why? Everything here is overpriced and tastes awful. Ashley pressed her lips together. Um, would you like a complimentary dish from the restaurant? Keanu narrowed his eyes. Oh, now you're trying to bribe me? She nearly groaned. God, this is impossible. Keanu laughed. See? Customers like this exist. Ashley rubbed her temples. So what do I do? The key is to recognize their mood. If someone is angry, don't argue with them. Show them that you hear them. Ashley thought for a moment. She took a deep breath. Sir, I can see you're not having the best evening. Maybe you just need a good night? We'd love to offer you something that might make it better. Keanu smiled. See? That's already better. For the first time, Ashley felt interested in what she was doing. Maybe she really could learn something. Her first difficult customer. On the third day of training, she had the chance to apply what she had learned. A middle-aged man walked into the restaurant with a sour expression. He glanced at the menu and grumbled. I hope the food isn't as terrible as last time. Before, Ashley would have snapped back. But now, she remembered Keanu's lesson. She stepped forward and calmly said, I'm sorry if you had a bad experience. Would you like me to help you choose a dish you'll enjoy? The man raised an eyebrow. And what do you recommend? Ashley knew the key was giving him control. Do you prefer something light or filling? Filling. Then I recommend our signature beef stew. It's made with the chef's special recipe. I think you'll like it. The man hesitated, then nodded. All right, let's try it. 20 minutes later, he had finished every last bite. When Ashley brought the check, he looked at her and said, You're the first waitress in a long time who didn't annoy me. It was a compliment in its own way. For the first time, Ashley felt satisfied with her job. The real test. The next day, an important food critic arrived. This is George Lynch, the manager told the staff. If he writes a good review, our restaurant's rating will skyrocket. We can't afford mistakes. Ashley's throat went dry. This was her chance or her downfall. She took a deep breath. Time to prove herself. She approached the critic's table. Good evening, she said calmly. Welcome to Lumiere. George looked up at her. Let's see if it's actually luminous, he muttered. Before, Ashley would have snapped, but she remembered Keanu's lesson. Stay polite. Don't react to provocation. Would you like to start with something special? She offered. George smirked. Oh, and what would you recommend? She nodded. Our chef's special today is truffle risotto with Parmesan, one of the best dishes on the menu. The critic tilted his head. All right, let's see how best it really is. The final moment. When he finished eating, he took a long pause before speaking. I'll say this, he finally said. This was the best service I've had in a long time. Ashley blinked in surprise. Thank you, she said softly. The food is good, but the service, that's what makes this restaurant truly special. She felt a wave of pride wash over her. That night, she realized something. She had changed, and it was her best lesson yet.